All right. Welcome back to another episode here. We have a fantastic guest with us today. We have Ashley Papa, who is an investment advisor and the director of wealth management at Digital Wealth Partners. Thank you for joining us, Ashley.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, most of our audience is going to have, an interest in digital assets. Many people follow along for financial education, business resources. They want to understand how to best position themselves prior to and post price appreciation for digital assets. And you do that for people every single day with Digital Wealth Partners. But I think it would be helpful for people if you could kind of give them a background, like where you've been and how you got into the position that you are today.
Thank you. That'd be great. So, like Jake mentioned, I'm the director of wealth management and also an investment advisor at DWP. I started my career with a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs, the ACO company, as a financial analyst, and that was from 2010 to 2013. Following that, I spent 10 years working in the ultra high net worth private wealth management space at a privately owned trust company, doing everything from cash flow management and debt planning, budgeting to investment management, tax planning, and a significant focus on wealth management, wealth transfer, and estate planning. From there, I worked at two small family offices, so definitely have some experience in that space. And then another high net worth RIA in the wealth management space as well. And then obviously, I'm now at Digital Wealth Partners. So all in all, about 15, 16 years of experience in financial planning and private wealth management. Along that course of my professional career, I did get my MBA at NYU Stern. So, with a focus on finance, economics, and financial instruments and markets. I have my Series 65, my CTFA. So, definitely a lot of qualifications on the educational side of things. But I would say most of my experience has been with client facing and full scope financial planning.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like and I know that you have had a very strong career. And I'm excited to have you, as a part of our team moving forward here. Um, so just at a high level, I think, your expertise is very unique. And then also you're able to apply this to digital assets. So, but I think we probably should take a step back for people and explain like what is a family office? And then also, when is that appropriate for people to even start looking at setting that up for themselves and their family and the legacy planning?
Absolutely. So in the industry, I'd say there are really two main types of family offices. One is a single family office, and then another is a multifamily office. I think the names are relatively self explanatory, but just to give a little bit of background there, a single family office would service one ultra high net worth or high net worth family. In terms of where it becomes appropriate, usually I would say if a family has $20 million to $30 million of assets that need to be managed, that's kind of the sweet spot where you might want to bring in a family office. And then naturally, a multifamily office would have multiple ultra high net worth or high net worth families within that same wealth range.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then there's people are starting to come downstream and trying to democratize access to it. And there's virtual family offices, but it really, economically doesn't make sense to hire professionals to work on your behalf until your net worth is, I'm same as you, 20 to 30 million. And even then it's kind of a skeleton crew. It's not, a full single family office. In my experience working with people that have had a liquidity event, that's really kind of the $100 million threshold where you would, set things up independently. Prior to that, I think a multifamily office makes a lot of sense to be able to consolidate costs and get all of the benefits without having to pony up all that money yourself. Um, like you would for a single family office. And that's what we do at Digital Ascension Group. Digital Wealth Partners is the wealth management arm of that. So I guess, that's been an important piece. There's a lot of different components to a family office. Wealth management and wealth planning are probably two of the main pieces for that. Do you think, your wealth manager could also be like the quarterback across the communications for all those people, or is that tend to be the matriarch or patriarch that made the money?
That's a great question. So, when I think about a family office, rather than just offering traditional investment management services or traditional financial planning, a family office really would act like the true quarterback for all aspects of a client or a client family's financial life. And maybe this term is cheesy, but really they become the CEO of your family and coordinate all of those financial aspects for you to take a lot of the daunting pieces of it off of the table for you and to make really all of your financial life work smoothly and in coordination with all the different hands or all the different parties at the table. And like you alluded to, this can include anything from typical investment planning and management, but to more complex aspects of your life, like tax services, strategic tax planning, cash flow planning, philanthropic planning, charitable giving, administrative aspects of your life, like bill pay, and certainly much more. But that's really why typically the clients or client families that will engage a family office do have that higher net worth that has a lot of those complexities that require more than just one individual advisor, but a lot of different parties coming to the table because it really is beyond the scope and ability of any one professional advisor.
Yeah. I mean, you and I both probably sit in a unique position where we're we know a lot about a lot of things in that arena, but I think even you would suggest that you want experts running those different components of your life, and then I've seen matriarch and patriarch people that have, they want to be that CEO, step into that position and run that across all of those professionals. But at some point, it does become very overwhelming, and if you don't have, the full attention or bandwidth to consistently watch that, it's probably better to hire somebody in that position. So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, and just one thing that I was going to say there is what I've seen a lot with some wealthy families, it might be business success. And like you mentioned, there can be a liquidity event. A lot of times I've seen families think that maybe being a CEO or a president of a company can translate into being that CEO of the family or the coordinator of all of the different parties. But a lot of the times it's not a one-to-one translation, or it might work a little differently, or there might need to be maybe a softer side of things because you are working with family members. And so having that team who can give some perspective outside of just running a business can sometimes be helpful to make things more efficient and also just kind between family members and, a warm environment and safe environment with thought leadership amongst different parts of a family's life.
Yeah. Oftentimes I'll see, we'll get into kind of mission statement, core values, and family charter, which is the most important thing when you're first starting this out. But in that, a lot of times I've seen people do a financial committee, which will be kind of the wealth management component, and then they have a family board, and they leave the majority of the financial decisions up to the managers that have high qualifications, that have been doing it for years and expertise there. And if anything's outside the swim lanes that they designated for the investment thesis for the family, that kind of reverts back to the board. And that also provides that buffer where just over time, as your family grows, there can be differences of opinion, and you probably need something to, keep there from being additional frictions that could cause the wealth of the family to be diluted, or some, party or family member deciding to be malicious against the other people involved. So, so circling back to the uh, family charter or the family compass, we have a lot of people that, we work with 10 family offices now. We consult on their behalf. We have a lot of clients that are, I'd say, high net worth individuals that own significant allocation to crypto. As these assets appreciate, what is the kind of order of operations if somebody wanted to progress down this path look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think making sure that you have the right structures in place up front is essential to having a goal-based or successful plan when price appreciation comes into play. And so with most of our clients, we think about not only the structures, but the safety related to the structures, privacy, protection from creditors, and then also down the road, potentially having control of these assets if something was to happen to you down the line or you were to become incapacitated. And so, from our perspective, certainly financial planning will come into play to know what you want to do with these assets when they appreciate, how you're going to use the wealth. But upfront, I'd say creating some type of entity around the digital assets that you have. So, whether that's an LLC or holding it outright in a trust, definitely important to have so that the assets are protected when they are worth more. And so, most of our clients, I would say, would establish an LLC first just holding their digital assets. One, for tax efficiencies, so that you can treat the assets, if there's any income or expenses, treat that in the right way from a tax perspective. Certainly having that wrapper around the digital assets so that they have that creditor protection. And then also sometimes creating a trust around the LLC so that, like I mentioned, if something was to happen to you, you know how the assets will be controlled at the end of the day. Having those entities set up to begin with makes you, or puts you in a good position when there is price appreciation, that you already have that protection, the established goals, and control over those assets.
Yeah. No, I love that, and, it is a commonality across most of our client base that they choose to go that route. And then people that have larger allocations tend to do, maybe even a little bit more complex estate planning upfront. And I would say that this is probably different than the majority of other asset classes because of the speed at which things appreciate in digital assets. Are there any other asset classes aside from maybe private equity that you think garner the same type of precaution, or somebody being as proactive as we see with our clients?
Private assets would definitely be a place where I would say they would want to have similar structure set up, or the same type of protection. Probably if they have some type of business, you would see similar protections put into place there, and definitely some complex planning. But I would say it's mostly in the private asset and digital asset space that I see clients really add a lot of protective structures around what they have. Another space where you might see this come up relatively frequently, I would say, with real estate. I often see LLCs or trusts created to protect some real estate, add privacy around real estate, create ways to avoid probate, because those can be relatively large assets. I think in any sort of space where something's potentially illiquid, or could significantly appreciate in value, that's really where you would look to do some of this complex financial planning, whether it's just creating protection around the assets that you have, or creating an estate plan so that you either move assets out of your estate during your lifetime, or you have a plan for the flow of them after your passing or after your incapacitation. And so I would say that it really is centered around appreciation that you'd expect in the asset, creditor protection, illiquidity of the asset. And I would say that those are kind of key components that I look at when thinking about what type of complexity an estate plan might need.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And before you set these structure up, I think, these ones that we were discussing now kind of give you the most flexibility post price appreciation. And that's a good thing, right? Because you're already ahead of the curve, and now you have this flexibility. I've seen this happen, unfortunately, where people get aggressive early and set up more complex structures that don't align with their goals and objectives over the long term. Or maybe maybe they change, right? Like maybe you get married and you have some kids, and you didn't think you needed a legacy plan, but now your trust doesn't accommodate those things. So, um, in order to mitigate that, do you think it's better to just kind of have these basic structures and then work through, that family charter before you do the more complex estate planning?
I think you can almost do them one in the same. So there are a couple different things that I would think about here. Obviously, first and foremost, make sure you speak with your financial advisor before going into any of these conversations with estate plans, or even sometimes with your CPAs. I've found throughout the course of my career that having initial conversation with your financial advisor just to lay out your goals, not only during your life, but certainly as you consider a legacy, are incredibly important, because then when you go to the table with an attorney or a CPA with some of these ideas, you at least have some structure or plan around it so you can make those meetings as efficient as possible. I think there can be room, especially when you think about an asset like a digital asset or a cryptocurrency. There can be room in anticipation of significant price appreciation to create some more complex structures up front and potentially fund some of those entities, knowing or with the anticipation of price appreciation. So a good example would be something like, and I know you talk about this relatively often, Jake, but with a digital asset protection trust, that's something that you can consider to shift assets out of your estate, because it is an irrevocable trust. But you can also still have, because it's a self-settled trust, you can also have some access to those funds as well. But you do have creditor protection there too. I've also seen some clients set up slats, and that might be a little